What's up, y'all? It's Kratos FM here, and we're going to talk about kingdoms, the maps, and how to upgrade them, because this is a constant question I get where people are asking what to upgrade where. And since we have K1 behind us, that's the first Kingdoms module, Beast Clan, and we have K2 coming up, the Coven, I figured this is a great time to actually sit down and make this video. So, as far as the maps go, from easiest to hardest, I would say the easiest is Convergence. The middle is Last Stand, and Ridgeline is by far the hardest. However, even though they have different difficulties and different layouts, the idea of how to manage them remains largely the same. So as you can observe here on Last Stand, we have all of our inns on the outside of the map. And then we have two inns that have a lot of roads. They have 4 roads each in the middle too. So using Last Stand as an example, the first thing you want to do is build your defensive trees. So your barracks, the militia, is you should usually put them on the outside inns first. The reason being, they take a little bit more time to get to, and if you're not going there as often, you don't want to have to go there all the time if sieges keep popping up. The same thing with Ridgeline, although Ridgeline is a bit more dangerous, so it's not bad to eventually get militia into every single space. For example, I would start with the outside inns for militia on these two, but definitely want to have them up here at the top end, because that takes a little bit of time to get to if you don't have like underground travel, or even if you do take underground travel, it could take you a couple of days to get there and then pop up there. But the rest of the map, the bottom half of the map, like the middle to the bottom, is relatively easier to traverse, and there's more inns instead of camps, so it's usually worthwhile to spend a lot of time in the bottom, meaning that after you do the sides, you should shore up the top with militia. Convergence, you can actually get away with very limited militia because the map is so small that you can get to everything yourself. But if you still want to use militia one more time, I recommend the outside inns, so the 2 ones on the edge. What to do with the high traffic areas, so the ones that have a lot of connections. 4 roads, 2 is a little too few, but 3 is a good amount as well. So if you have 4 or 3 connections to an inn, that's where you want to put your high impact upgrades. So you want to put the provision tree up to the bazaar, that's the capstone, the mastery capstone, the physician capstone. We'll talk about those in a sec, but those are ideal for the high traffic areas because you get the most value out of them. So now let's hop into one map here and we'll talk about what to do for upgrades. Now that we have a visual in front of us where it's not just the picture of the map, it's the actual map, maybe this will help explain things a bit better. First thing to consider are the underground inns. Just going to go over a lot of map management stuff when I can, but these tunnels with the flags, this is your underground travel. It says underground access under it, and all of them will tell you if you have to go there or if they're already unlocked. You can even tell this tunnel has, instead of the open thing with the flag, you have a boarded up entrance. So you have to visit all of these at least once to access the underground travel. And then once you have that, say you wanted to travel all the way down here. So if you're at this end, up at the top, you would click this and set travel would actually pop up. So that's how you do that. And then as I was saying before, your outside inns are the ones you tend to want to put militia on. And maybe it makes more sense now that you can see it, right? Because these are a bit farther out of the way. Because if you're spending a lot of your time here, because that's like your high traffic area, you know, spending an extra day or sometimes 2 depending to like get to all these can really set some things behind. And my final thing for early like map management or just overall management is don't sleep on these treasure icons. You get a couple when the game starts, and every time you beat a siege that your team physically wasn't at, so the main team, the wagon team, then you can go to these places and pick up stuff. This is only a level 1 treasure. They go up to 3, and you can see how many days they last until you go pick them up. So early on, these are really helpful. Just any amount of extra currency. Sometimes there's trinkets, baubles, and stuff like that. So they're very good to head off to, but don't put anything in danger going for them. They're not game breaking. They're just really helpful. All right. For sieges, the number on the left, this is the level of the militia. It goes 1, 2, 3. In this case, it's none. And this is how many days until the siege triggers. And this icon up here grows in further escalations, and I think it's supposed to depict how dangerous the siege is. Right now, we got some very mild starting off sieges. Now, let us look at the trees. So for in management, when I say upgrading for militia to defend it, level 1, the conscripts can't really hold anything by themselves, even at escalation 1. So you want them to be with heroes. You always get 2 fighters to arbalists, if no matter what level they are. The arbalist is way more important. So if you can, you want to put maybe frontliners here, because the arbalist has a really good range hit, and she has a heal, and then later on she has an AoE that combos and stuff like that. So the archers are the most important ones of this bunch. But you start off with the conscripts. These want heroes to help them. They're not that strong. You can even send like 1 or 2 heroes. I recommend frontliners, but you know, they can get it done if they have a little bit of extra help. Then later on, you can unlock flares. The conscript flare, very weak, much like the conscript itself. Partisans, though, this is definitely worth pushing early. So partisans can handle escalation 1, where the enemies don't have any buffs yet, and they're pretty good against escalation 2. Some enemy matches can really brutalize them and you might lose, but they're doable. Meanwhile, the veterans can hold any siege at any escalation. So 1, easy, 2, easy, 3, still pretty reliable. So sometimes there's a match that might gank them, like if you misplay their turns or something like that, but overall, they can hold an inn by themselves for the rest of time. The veteran flare is also worth getting if you need to move around and help defend stuff. The capstone, the ordnance supply capstone. Extra assistance scouting, less enemy advantage chance. The veterans will start fights with combat items and indelible trinkets. So those are the highest tier, the yellow ones. I've seen them get nautical compass and true entropy. So they can get some wild stuff. The provisioner tree is actually one of my favorites, and I think it's a very, very strong in upgrade tree, but it's also the most expensive, if I'm not mistaken. It costs a lot compared to everything except maybe the physician, but yeah, it's way more expensive, so. The reason, though, is it's absolutely worth it. When you look at the tree for provisioning, you can get extra items that you're used to if you play Confessions. So the better food, like cheese and apples, steak, you know, those kind of things, and just better inn items overall. There's a lot to detail in there, and whiskey specifically, so affinity is very powerful in both game modes, and it's very, 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 very good in Kingdoms. So that being said, the reason the provisioner tree is so powerful is because a lot of the other trees give you access to items. The flares are combat items. You get more items here. You can get strong combat items in the mastery tree. The Wainwright gives you pets and wagon gear. Position tree near the end has items that you can buy for these are the combat items, so I believe like salve, adrenaline tonic, etc. So the reason this is so good is because there are a couple discounts in this tree. For instance, right here, combat and in-item prices reduced. Combat and in-items, the prices are reduced. So everything you pick up in these other trees, disregarding this one because it's in the advanced section, but if you just spend 15 to go over here and then make a physician in to get the combat items, they're discounted. So it discounts every single thing that appears in there. And if that's not enough, if you pass a day to recuperate or just wait for an event to happen, the shop will refresh and you can get more stuff. So it's an incredibly powerful tree, and I can see a lot of inns, if they're specialized in other things, you may still dip into this to get the benefits. But that's pretty much what it has going for it. It just gives you access to more items, just better stuff, and stuff is cheaper. And then the indelible trinkets is pretty cool. Now, in my opinion, the capstone here is one of the best. You get inmats every time you come here, which can help you build all of the other inns over time, but it's kind of costly to get there. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 90. It's very expensive, but however, you come back to this place 5 times, you could literally just go back and forth, you know, if it allows you to, and you can get that cost back. So it's a good one to rush. Not only that, guaranteed quarter scouting. Pretty important, you know, that's in the adjacent regions because you're also getting extra relics and baubles looted. The currency is very helpful because I don't know how many of you have gone like deep in a Kingdoms run. Currency itself, so relics and baubles, mastery you end up catching up with, but relics and baubles tend to be in shorter supply comparatively, and this really helps out with that. And then as for unique items appearing in the shop, I believe this refers to the in items that heroes can have. If you remember Confessions, you know, Dismas, Highwayman gets the Morbid Joke Book, which is a huge like set of affinity. So things like that can now appear in the shop if you have a Grand Bazaar. So in my opinion, this is an incredibly powerful capstone, and it's a good one to put on your high traffic spots, so your four road nodes. Mastery. Not usually one you go deep into, because pretty much all the important stuff you need is in the top. So it unlocked hero skills, really important early, because even standard or mystery skill sets, you still want to fine tune them. Upgrading skills, very important. The key to later to escalation 2, the jump from 1 to 2, the thing you want most are mastery skills, because that helps you bridge the gap in the enemy, you know, doing a little more damage and having more HP. So you get your extra couple points of damage and your block tokens become block plus, things like that. And increased healing, of course. So this is an okay thing to splash into whenever you need to. So it's okay to drop 10 or 20 in mats when you randomly go somewhere if you have like 6 mastery, just to, you know, spend them. The path change being down here is really good. So you spend the extra 10 or 20 total and reduce the price, you can get paths for, I believe, 12 or 16 gold. The number escapes me, but this is a really good one for mid-game, just because after you get your skills out and mastered, because a lot of heroes these days that have gotten rework can survive as Wanderer for a long time. But when you start trying to finalize the team that you want to use, you know, you go, okay, these 4 to maybe 6 characters I want to take to the boss, you can start giving them paths and juicing them up a little bit more. So make sure you're looking out for that, especially the old paths that we have right now. So we still have some characters that haven't gotten reworked, like Plague Doctor, Runaway Hellion, for example. Leper hasn't gotten reworked either, but his paths don't really impact too much outside of maybe Poets. But yeah, so if you really want to just win reliably, or if you're doing a challenge or something like that, this is where you start buying the really strong paths like Ravager and Alchemist even works, or Surgeon, and then Arsonist. Or if you just have something you want to do with your current team, you know, if you're running an Occultist and you really want him to start pumping out damage, then you can buy Warlock, you know. So good to, as I said, drop into and get some of these. I wouldn't give every single inn all of this. I think it's a bit too much, but every inn having one or both of these long term is okay, and one or two inns that have the paths are fine as well. However, those one or two that you upgrade the path system on, consider making them the actual mastery inn. The trainer texts upgrade hero stats. So in Confessions, you have the Altar of Hope where you buy stats on a hero track. So it'll be like plus 5 Deathblow resist, plus 4 HP, plus like 5 stun resist, alongside getting paths, for example. And in Kingdoms, when you're on the Mastery Trainer, you have the skills page, and then over here you have the hero upgrades page. So this is what the Mastery tree gives you. This is the Mastery stats thing. So every character, because as you notice, they start with 60 Deathblow resist, which is kind of scary and a bit low, if I can be quite honest. So every character has their own set of 5 skills to upgrade, or I should say stats, and these all cost 1 mastery point. They vary in what they're doing and how strong they are, for example, but later on, it's really good to get some of these. For instance, not just the Deathblow resist, but the fatigue limit. So fatigue normally will cap at half of your HP. And having a quirk can make it go lower or sometimes higher. There's one that gives you, I think, like a 20% cap increase. So you can go down to 70, which you should never be close to, if I can be quite honest. But when you have the minus fatigue limit, it's kind of a weird, like, double negative type of thing, at least in my head. Because you're losing HP, but then like you're minusing the minus HP, so you're adding HP back to yourself. So if the cap is 50 baseline, seeing this at minus 10 fatigue limit means your cap goes from 50 to 40% of your HP. So if you had 100 life, your cap wouldn't be 50 life, it would be 60, if that makes sense. So these are really good to get on your main team, because it'll help them stay fresh and in fights longer, and you can lean on them more heavily. And a couple of them are just stat upgrades, right? We see 5 Deathblow resist, 20 burn resist, which is important if Bonnie goes Arsonist because she can self-burn. Fatigue limit, great for everyone. Next one, plus 1 speed, plus 2% crit. That's pretty huge. And then we get another simple note. It's always like Deathblow resist, like cool stat increase, Deathblow resist, and then the cool stat increase repeats. So we get another speed and 2 crit. The 5th one, though, is always something special. So in this case, if a target is burning and Bonnie hits them again with fire, they get combo. That's pretty cool for almost any team. Some of them are honestly game-changing, so it's always worth trying to get these at some point. Like, I highly recommend, if you're heading towards escalation, like the end of escalation 2 into 3, you need to get one of these, because once you get into escalation 3, you can't master skills a second time to get like a stat increase. So this is how you bridge that gap. The stuff under it, the station heroes get 5% crit. That means they have to stay here, and this is honestly not that impactful. And then the bonus combat items also not that impactful in my experience. And then finally, arriving at this inn gives you 1 mastery point. And then at the start of a resistance encounter, heroes gain strength, which is cool. And then you can scout those resistance encounters. I tend to find this one to be one of the lower impact capstones, personally. I don't even think I have to say personally, because I'm just making a video, but just in case anyone wants to debate it, that's just my opinion. The Wainwright, kind of a niche tree, because you only need to dip into this a couple times, like, to get, you know, usually to mount a trophy or a pet. This is always a good dip, though, because all repairs, I believe, are, yeah, 12 baubles to start. And this cuts them to 8, which is really nice. So it's okay to drop 10 every now and then if you need to really fix quickly. Mounting a trophy, trophies aren't too worth going for in Kingdoms unless you do it early. Like Escalation 1 trophies are good because you have the stats. You know, your team is strong enough to usually take down most layers except the Tundra one. That one's a bit tough. So being able to get trophies early is helpful. Mid game, it's still doable. Late game, I would not advise it just because the bosses are essentially ordained, you know, and not quite ordained, but you know, they have bonus stats and that can be really dangerous. And then otherwise, better stagecoach items, cheaper stagecoach items, which stacks with Provisioner if it has a, yeah, right here. So that stacks with this, right, as I was saying before. And then the Veteran Wainwright, actually the pets too, can equip pets and you get basic pets. I don't know why the Provisioner gets special pets, but the Wainwright gets the basic pets and they kind of split up like that. Then the final one is arriving at this inn gives you one of each token and stationed heroes. So if they stay here for a day, then they get the positive relationship chance, which is also pretty good. So this is a solid ending node. The capstone. Adjacent regions have location and route scouting. Minus flame drain. When I was in Escalation 1, normally I'd have either 10 or 0 flame by the time I got to the siege. But when I had this on the inn, I had, I believe, 23. So it should be around like 25, 30 to like 20. When you get to the end, which is way more better than 0 because of the blind chance from the flame. Adjacent regions, enemies on road combat get weaken and vulnerable. So it's pretty solid. This whole thing, this is not a totally great, like this isn't a good one normally for your high traffic spot, but it's not a bad one overall. Well, actually, you know what, I'll discuss the capstones more in a minute here because I'm starting to rethink some things. But finally, the Physician Inn. This is a really, really important one. It's usually good to have at least one of these on the map. And so if you've ever been like, dang, I really want a field hospital, you can make one. This is literally a field hospital when you max it out. And that's pretty awesome. So first thing you get, you can cure disease and you can lower the cost. Station heroes, if you pass a day, heal an additional 10 fatigue, 1 stress, and 10% health. This is another really good dip into a tree if you're going to pass at least a day. You'd be surprised how much of an impact that can have, because I think the base fatigue healing is either 5 or 10. If it's 10, that's really good. If it's 5, that's still okay, because adding 10 on top of that and healing 2 stress can actually really help a team recover quickly. Like, this straight up just might be doubling the healing effectiveness now that I think about it. So really good to splash into, and since it's not an advanced tree, it means that you can have this and not worry about locking yourself out. So something I probably should have said earlier is that whenever you cross this line into an advanced tree, it'll lock out the advanced tree on every other upgrade path that you have access to, except barracks, because there's no advanced tree. So be careful. That's why you have to be considerate with what you're doing. When you go into the advanced tree, you can remove negatives and lock positives and reduce the cost of those quirk interactions. Very good. The final physician upgrades, so if you want to, well, at least the healing ones, if you station here, you heal very quickly. And then the physician can heal fatigue with baubles, and you can reduce the cost. And then over here, sterile storage, this gives you the access to combat items like healing salve, all the other like good healing stuff. And then you can reduce healing prices, but I don't feel that you need this because that means you have to get both of these. And, if you're not going to pass a day here, then, even then that's not too impactful. Finally, there is the physician capstone. So when you get to this inn, heroes gain 1 positive quirk. This is good and potentially bad because re-rolling quirks and getting good ones all the time means you might be able to get something really special like Defiant, Deadly, Jinx, for example. However, since the quirks come in a lot faster every time you come here, because quirks come in pretty quickly in Kingdoms, I've noticed, and so when you come to this inn, you're going to be re-rolling quirks that you might want to keep, possibly, consistently. So, special Slayer quirks, Hater quirks, that same Jinx you might pick up somewhere else, you might roll it off. So, this is kind of a double-edged sword, so just be aware of that. However, adjacent regions, hospital and surgeon table scouting, pretty good overall, but honestly, if you are deep enough in here to get this capstone, it means you're next to this inn. You don't really need the hospital scouting because you're probably on your way here anyway, or on your way out, I guess, and you already healed up. The final good thing, though, minus damage over time received, this saves you a lot of HP. This is, for some enemies, doing damage over time, this could be a 25%, a 33% damage decrease. And sometimes enemies like to throw out damage over time constantly. So having something that just mitigates this can literally save lives. A little recap before I go over the capstones for a more opinion-driven discussion, and that is to remember that your high impact capstones, you want them on the high traffic areas. So everything that has 4 routes, that's where I would suggest putting them, just because you spend the most time around this. The ones on the edge, those can be lower impact capstones or advanced trees, because you really don't need more than like the couple high traffic ones for capstones, just because you're going to come here and put militia because you don't come here that often. And so if you put vets here, you probably aren't coming back there with your team. If ever, maybe like 1 or 2 more times, but that's it. So by that logic, you don't really need capstones on the outer ones. So you're really just looking at a couple for the, as I said before, the high traffic ones in the middle, or if they have a couple extra paths like Ridgeline. Now, for said capstones, Ordnance. I personally don't think this is a good one. It's very low impact to me, because at least in Kingdoms 1, so the Beast Clan, the farther you get, the stronger the invasion is. So there are more resistance fights and road fights. Assistance encounters start to drop in appearance because fighting increases. So you may not even see many assistance encounters, and being able to scout them doesn't really matter as much if they're not even going to appear sometimes. Adjacent regions, enemy advantage chance lowered. This is okay. That's relatively helpful, but not super amazing. And then the Arbalists and Fighters start with items or 1 item and 1 trinket. The Veterans don't need this to win. They are good enough without it. You may have to be a little careful and really focus on learning the enemy attack patterns, but, that's just something you have to do, right? Just gotta learn that, and then you will never need this. Provisioner. I think this is the best one just because it's all currency. So you get extra inmets, and you get extra relics and baubles. That specifically is incredibly helpful. Adjacent regions, Hoarder scouting. Any adjacent region scouting is not super important because, as I said, fighting is the thing that's going to take precedence late game. Unique items appear in the shop. That's pretty cool. However, this is also the most expensive tree to fill out, so be warned. Yeah, I think this is the best one on the big traffic areas. Mastery. I don't think this is worth it just because by the time you get to like mid game into late game, you don't really need mastery anymore. You have the couple skills you need on the other heroes, and once your main team starts getting all of their stats unlocked, then you just don't need this at all. This will help you get there though. So even though I think this is kind of mid, actually. I was downplaying it a little bit, but I think it's actually decent. So you spend a lot of time going back and forth. You actually can fill out your team pretty quickly. So this is a bit better than I was giving it credit for. And even though you don't really need to scout the resistance encounters, those are the most common late game. And then finally, you get a strength token at the start of those fights. So this is actually pretty solid. My issue with the capstone actually isn't so much the capstone itself, it's these two before you get there. So 5 crit for staying here for a day and it lasts 1 region doesn't really strike me as super amazing. Although this should work on any defending heroes, they should get that crit, so if you like that, then that's okay. And then getting extra combat items for the armory. You know, the combat items that are offensive based don't tend to be the best ones. They're helpful, but they're not the best though. And the best ones are usually healing and utility. And I would put damage combat items at the bottom of that. So these two, even though they're relatively cheap, these really turn me off of going here. Especially because you don't need the trainer text until, you know, mid-late game. But if you want to rush this, it's still not bad. It can really help you fill out your team. The win rate. As I said, for the capstone, I was about to recap the whole thing actually, but this last one is pretty solid. Saves you, you know, since you lower this, it can save you 8 to 16 baubles every time you swing through. That's not bad. And even though we know what the locations are going to be usually throughout the run, honestly, because with the Kingdom's Quest, it force spawns specific nodes if you have to visit them for that quest step. Like, the very first step with the spyglass will always spawn the watchtower until you do that part. So with the capstone, the extra scouting's okay, especially the route scouting. The flame drain's okay, and then road combat enemies get debuffed. That's not super good. So this might... This is near the bottom with the barracks. So right now, I would say Provisioner first, in terms of like power level. Physician second. Mastery third. And then these two, the barracks and the Wainwright, are tied for last. Yeah. With Physician being able to, you know, on the chance that a hospital does spawn, it's still super helpful if you're like on your way in instead of on your way out, for example. And the minus dot received is really helpful, so I guess that's what I'm going for here. So for the central high traffic spots, either Provisioner, Mastery, or Physician. And then the outer ones, possibly Wainwrights, or what was the other one? The Barracks? But yeah, I would focus on getting those other 3 before those, and as I said before, I wouldn't capstone the outer ends. I would just get Veteran Militia and just leave them alone. Alright. That's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Let me know if you had a different experience or what you tend to do for upgrades. Because there's a lot of ways to play this game, and it's always cool to see what people figure out because it makes all of us a little bit better. Thanks so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.